Afternoon. My name is Catherine Minthorn. I am a technical assistant specialist with Intertribal Agriculture Council. Today, we're on the second section of Dallas Mount's presentations. Dallas is the CEO of the Ranch Management Consaltants out of Wheatland, Wyoming. We would also like to give out a big thanks to all of our sponsors for the IAC conference. This session is sponsored by our champions of native agriculture sponsors, as well as Barn to Door. We'd like to go now and give the reins over to Dallas, and he can finish his second presentation.
All right, thanks, Catherine. So I'm going to assume we have some new people joining us on this time. So if you're joining for the second session in a row, you're going to hear kind of some of the same things, but I will assume we have some new people. So if you're joining us for the second time, bear with us here just a second. As Catherine said, I run a company called Ranch Management Consultants. We do a couple of things. We teach the Ranching for Profit School. Ranching for Profit is a 7-day business management school for people in agriculture. And it's based on the idea that knowing how to raise livestock is not the same thing as knowing how to run a business that raises livestock or grows crops. Okay? So that's what we do. We're in the business of teaching business management skills to those involved in agriculture. And we've been doing it for about 40 years. The second thing we do is a program we call Executive Link, and we refer to it as EL. In EL, we put businesses on boards of directors for each other. So we put 6 businesses on a board. And so for 5/6 of that meeting, you're an advisor to somebody else's business. So they're putting things on the table. They're talking about often their numbers, their financials, maybe struggles with people in their business. And you provide strategic advice to that business. And then for 1/6 of that meeting, the tables are turned and they do that for you. It is an extremely powerful program at helping people turn around their businesses to create the results that they want to achieve. So we call that program Executive Link. So those are the 2 things that we do. This is just a snapshot of the businesses that attended Ranching for Profit schools last year. So we generally do about 9 schools a year across the U.S. And our really heavy school season is just around the corner. In fact, we just did a school last week in Abilene, Texas. And we've got one going on right now in Tucson, Arizona. And then after the first of the year, we do a lot back to back to back. And so that's our school schedule for the coming year. So if you'd like to get involved with us, we'd love to have you come to a school. And a lot of the people who come to schools actually choose to repeat a second, third, or fourth time because it's such a rich learning environment. And the people you associate with there are really oftentimes hard driving, good people pushing forward. So, all right, we're going to talk today about the 3 secrets of increasing profit. And this is true for any business. So we're going to use a livestock farm as an example, but this could be true for any business, even a business in town or, a car dealership or a hotel or, you fill in the blank, the principles will carry forward. But we're going to talk about down and out farms. Okay, so down and out farms is 2 generations. So there's currently a kind of the managing or owning generation, and then an incoming generation. And so you'll recognize the people on the top left there. I used to have a picture of a real ranching family and it was one I just stole off the internet until one day that ranching family came to one of my schools and they're like, "Why do you have a picture of us on your slide?" So I decided to switch to. I don't think Ashton Kutcher and Sam Elliott are going to come to Ranching for Profit anytime soon, but who knows? So this ranch or farm, they actually got several things going on. Let me describe them to you a little bit. They have a cow-calf herd, and it's been a home-raised cow-calf herd. They've been doing it for generations. Out of that cow-calf business, they keep their heifer calves and they run them as kind of a yearling program, running them out in the wintertime and in the next summer on grass, exposing those heifers to breeding for a short breeding season. And then those heifers that breed early, they keep as their replacement heifers. Heifers that breed late or don't breed at all, they sell off as essentially yearlings off grass. And then the ranch also raises hay to in most years, they raise as much hay as they need. But as we look at the economics of the business, so if we just went to their accounting that their tax accountant prepared for them and opened the books and says, well, what was your gross sales last year? It would be 100% livestock sales. And that number for them was $332,000 last year. So that was their gross sales. And then if we flip the page and said, well, let's look at your expenses. And this is their accountant has prepared this for filing their taxes at the end of the year. So this is the way their expenses broke down. So feed would obviously be a big one, vet, fuel and oil, fertilizer, seeds and planting. The list goes on and on and on. And the total expenses of the year were $336,000. So if we lay those two next to each other, total sales of 332 and total expenses of 336, you'll notice that there's a $4,000 net loss on the business. And so if I were to ask you to look at these numbers and tell me where the problem is, okay, where is it? Where is the problem? Okay, so we'll look down through this list, and obviously there's some big ticket items that you kind of wonder, well, gosh, maybe there's some room in there. There's also some things that are not listed on here. Okay, for example, look at this: paid labor. Okay, $24,000. Now that includes owner draw in the business as well. Okay, there's 2 generations on this ranch. Okay, are they paying fair market wages? Okay. For 2 people working full time in the business, $24,000, they're not taking anywhere near what it would cost to replace them, are they? And if they had to hire that work done from somebody else, could they hire that done for $24,000? No way. It would cost at least twice, probably more like 4 times that amount. Okay, so they're actually working for free, almost. I mean, they're taking a little draw out, but they're pretty much working for free. What else do you not see? Okay, there's no land payment. Okay, don't see any land payment. Don't see a cow note. Okay, so this ranch is pretty much, we could say it's a multi-generation ranch. They own the land free and clear. They don't have any debt owed against the cows. We do have some equipment purchases in there, so they are upgrading some equipment. Okay, but boy, that's kind of a tough spot to be, losing $4,000 and doing it on owned land and owned cows and all those things. So back to the question, where's the problem? Okay, well, if you're like me, you kind of shrug your shoulders at this, right? I mean, this is it. You can't get the information you need out of these numbers to answer that question. These numbers were prepared by the tax accountant. Okay, not they weren't prepared with the idea of making management decisions easier. Okay, they were prepared with the idea of doing the reporting for end of the year taxes. Okay, so we need a different way of doing the numbers. So we'll dive in here and we'll get to a different way of doing the numbers by the end of the presentation. So stick with me. But let's look into this a little bit. Okay, if most farms and ranches operate at an economic loss, then why don't they go bankrupt? Okay, because that's true. Most farms and ranches are operating at an economic loss. Meaning every year, if you figured out all the economic cost of running their businesses, they're like the numbers we just saw. Okay, they're not covering all their costs. So why don't they go bankrupt? Well, number one, off-farm income. And that's the example for this ranch we're looking at. Okay, so how can 2 families afford to live on this place and only do that on $24,000? Well, they probably have spouses that work off-farm. And those spouses are covering their family living expenses. Okay, those spouses are oftentimes providing the health insurance and things like that for the family as well. Okay, so that's the number one reason. off-farm income. Number two is they work for free. So just like this family that we looked at in the previous, they don't pay themselves what it would cost to replace themselves. Okay? They work at a steeply discounted rate. So their business doesn't really have to support employees. Okay? Whoops, wrong direction. Appreciating land values. Okay. A lot of farms and ranches are only ranching today because land values have gone up. And after so many generations, we choose to carve some of that off and we let that run the business for the next few years. And then lastly is inherited wealth. And that's probably the case for this business we looked at on the previous pages. I mean, would these folks be ranching today if they hadn't been born into the right family? And the answer in reality is probably no. Okay. So it's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. So we think we should change that. And as we look at changing that, let's start a livestock business together from scratch. Okay. And so we're going to explore the economics of this farm or ranch and doing that, starting it completely from scratch. And when we say from scratch, we really mean from scratch. And we have three choices in this business, like you do in any business. Okay? So when we start this business, we could choose to subsidize the business, which is what most of your neighbors do with all the things we just talked about on the previous page. And we could choose to go broke, go out of business, which is what most of the businesses on Main Street do. Did you know that 9 out of 10 new businesses that start go out of business within 10 years? Isn't that interesting? 90% of them, when you see a new business open up on Main Street or somebody hang a shingle out, on average, after 10 years, 9 of those will be gone and only 1 will remain. So that's what happens to most businesses. When it doesn't work, they go broke, they go out of business, or we could choose to make a profit. Okay? So we're going to choose option number 3 in this example. So let's build this business from scratch with the intent of making a profit. So we've got, when we say from scratch, we really mean from scratch. We have no land, we have no livestock, we have no money, and perhaps most challenging is we have no time. Okay? So what we mean by this is any land that we use in this business, we're going to have to pay fair market value for. Okay, we don't just have the opportunity to walk onto a piece of land and use it for free. Okay, so we're going to have to pay fair market value for that. Any livestock that we're bringing into this business, we're going to have to buy. So we're going to budget in the cost of getting those animals brought in. And when we say we have no money, that we're going to pay interest on those livestock. Okay, because we probably do have money, but it's tied up in other things. It's not sitting there for cash for us to just let our cows use it for free. Okay, so if we're going to turn our cash into cows, we're going to want to be paid interest for that money. Okay? Or we can go borrow it from somebody else who's going to want interest. And then we have no time. So any work that's done in this business, we're going to have to pay for it. So, I mean, if I'm going to do it, we'll pay me. If you're going to do it, we'll pay you, but nobody's going to work for free. Okay, so we're not going to subsidize the business with any of those things that your neighbors do. We're going to make it stand on its own economically. So let's get to it. Okay, on this axis we have, on the left axis is total dollars, and on the bottom axis is numbers in the enterprise. And if you're listening to us, you might just want to scratch this diagram out with us as you go, because I think there's a lot to take away from this diagram that we're going to draw together. Okay. So where do we start? What's the first thing we need? We're going to start this livestock business from scratch. So I think probably the first thing we need is some land. Okay, so we need a place to do business. So when we've got land, when we need land to head to a livestock business, we really have 2 choices, right? We could buy it or we could rent it. Okay, so we could choose to buy that land, or we could choose to rent it. So how many of you guys want to buy it? I would expect to probably see a few hands popping up, right? Yeah, I want to own it. Well, there's darn good reasons to own land, isn't there? I mean, over time, you're going to build wealth in that. If we own land and today it's worth this, 10 years from now, it's probably going to be worth more. 20 years from now, it's going to be worth a lot more. So land is a great place to park money to build wealth over time. Okay, so there's good reasons to own it. If you own it, nobody can kick you off of it, right? It's yours to to control as long as you're making your payments to the bank with it. Any infrastructure improvements that get done, we get to keep, right? They're not done on somebody else's land. So there's definitely good reasons to buy it. But what about reasons to rent it? Are there good reasons to rent it? Okay. Well, it's probably cheaper. Okay, we can rent it for this amount when it takes this amount to buy it. Okay, so from a cash flow perspective, we could do it for less. We're going to rent it with before tax dollars. Okay, before tax dollars, which that means is we're essentially going to be able to take the land rent and write it off as an expense. Okay, where when we buy it, we're doing that with money left over after taxes. Okay, so there's good reasons to buy it and there's good reasons to rent it. Okay? And in this example, what are we going to do? Okay, let me go back a slide here and ask you a question. What business did I say we're going into together? I'll look up here at the top. We are going into the livestock business together. Okay. Did I say anything about going into the land business together? So think about this. The land and the livestock are two separate businesses. They're two separate businesses, and they really should be treated as such. Think about it this way: could you own 1 million acres of land and not own one stinking cow? Well, sure, yeah, absolutely. We could lease that land out to somebody else, right? Could you own 1,000 cows and not own 1 acre of land? Yeah, you absolutely could. And there's quite a few people that do it, right? They would have to rent that ground and have some good lease agreements, but they could sure have a lot of livestock and not 1 acre of land. Okay. And so when we look at the livestock business, we need to distinctly separate the livestock business from the land business. Let's not confuse the two. Okay. There's good reasons to be in the land business. I'm not telling you don't buy land. Okay. There's very good reasons to be in the land business, but they're different reasons from being in the livestock business. Okay. And we need to treat those as two separate businesses. If we own the land, guess what? Our land business is going to rent that land to our livestock for a fair market value. Okay. If we're in the livestock business, our livestock are going to pay a rent to our land business. Okay. So we're essentially going to move money out of our right pocket and put it into our left, because we need to know what's creating the value. Is our land business creating the value, or is our livestock business creating the value? So we need to separate those. So when we do a economic analysis, we make the distinction of where is the value coming from, and we separate those values. So in this example, we're going to rent it. Okay? Even if we own it, we're going to rent it because we're talking about the livestock business. So we need some costs here. Let's say we found a ranch to rent, and we're going to get it for flat cash rent per year. So maybe, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out a number. Every number we're going to use is going to be wrong. We're going to pay $30,000 a year to rent this ranch. Okay. And it's going to come with all the corrals and facilities and water and pipelines and stock tanks and all the things that we need to have a livestock business on it. Okay. So now we've got land. So we've got 1 unit of costs, a big chunk of costs here, and we don't have any animals yet. Okay. We're still at 0 on our animals, but we've got land. What's the next thing we need? And before the trucks pull up and unload our prized cows we just bought. Okay. Well, we're probably going to need labor. Okay. Somebody's going to need to be there to unload the truck. Okay. Before we have that first truck back up. So what's a good full-time cowboy, cowgirl, 1 unit of labor cost? Okay. Every number we're going to use is going to be wrong. What if I said $3,000 a month? Okay. So $3,000 a month, that's $36,000 per year. Okay. Well, thank goodness the costs stop there, right? No, they don't stop there. We're going to need to have employment taxes. Okay. This person's probably going to want to live in a house that we provide. So we're going to have some housing. That house is going to have utility expenses with it. We're probably going to pay that. Maybe they get half a beef a year. Maybe they get some kind of benefits, retirement, health insurance. They're probably going to drive a pickup that belongs to us. We're going to have repairs and maintenance and depreciation and fuel and all those expenses on that pickup. It might surprise you to learn that 1 unit of labor on a ranch today costs between $60,000 and $80,000 for 1 unit of labor. Okay. When we add up all these different things that are part of employing that 1 unit of labor. So $60,000 to $80,000 for 1 unit of labor on the ranch. Okay. So we've rented a ranch now and we've paid all these costs for labor and we don't have 1 stinking cow yet. So we've got a big chunk of costs. There we go. So this piece is land and this piece is labor. Okay. And we call these costs overheads. Okay. Overheads. All right. So some rules of overheads. All land and all labor costs are overheads. Okay. Overheads tend not to change as the units of production increase. Okay. So let's say we've rented a ranch that, we could run 300 to 400 cows and we've got 1 unit of labor that can take care of, as many animals as a person can take care of. So if we ran 250 cows, we've got the same ranch and the same labor. If we run 350 cows, we've got the same ranch and the same labor. Okay. At some point, we're going to maximize those resources and have to add another ranch or another unit of labor, right? And so those overheads would jump like that, right? They're going to, when they adjust, they tend to jump up. Okay. So there's the overheads, labor and land, and they tend not to change as the units of production increase. All right. So now we need to go get some cows, and we're going to go buy a humdinger of a cow, and it's going to raise a nice big calf. Oh, there's my overheads that went on there. Okay. And so we need to introduce a couple other terms to you now. And the first we're going to talk about here is gross product. Okay. Let me change colors. Let's do gross product in green. Okay. So to do gross product, let's just start with an example. And we're going to say we have 100 cows that we bought at the beginning of the year, or maybe we raised them and they're all bred cows. Okay. Now, are all those cows going to raise a calf? Well, absolutely not. Okay. And some of those cows might actually die, right? So let's say we got 2 deads. Okay. So we got 2 dead cows. And then at the end of the year, when we get to the weaning pen, we have 90 weaned calves. Yeah, we got 90 weaned calves, and let's say they're worth $700 a piece. Okay. Every number I'm going to use is wrong. It's not going to be the right number for you. We're just looking for the principle here. So 90 times $700 gives me $63,000. Whoa, sometimes my pen acts funny. $63,000 of cash for those calves. Okay. Are we going to have some other stuff to sell? Okay. Well, yeah, we probably have some cull cows, some cows that didn't get bred, some that we don't want to keep anymore, even if they are bred. So let's say we have 15 cull cows, and we're going to get $600 a piece for those. Okay, so 600 times 15 is 9,000. Okay, so we've got $9,000 of cull cow sales. Okay, so plus our 63. So that gives me $72,000 of sales, right? But what are we left with at the end of the year if we sold all that? Well, we'd start with 100 cows and 2 of them died. We sold 15. So we actually have 17 less. So we're down to 83, right? We're down to 83 cows. Well, we need to get back to 100 cows in order to compare apples to apples. So I actually need to buy 17 breds. Okay. And we're going to buy those to put us back at 100 cows. And let's say we're going to have to give, I don't know, they're probably $1,200 to $1,500. Let's say $1,300 is what we're going to pay for those breds. and I need 17 of them times the $1,300. So, whoops, 17 times 1,300. Okay, $22,100 is what I'm going to have to pay for those. Okay. So gross product, let's define this because that's what we're calculating. Gross product equals the value of production. Okay, this is the value of what we produced. So if I wanted to calculate the value of my production, these are my sales. Okay, now that's cash, but that's not necessarily value. So if I took those sales, that money, and I went back and bought back enough replacement animals to get me back where I started, the difference between those two is really the value I created. Okay, so I'm going to take the 72,000 minus the 22,100, and that gives me 49,900. Okay, so that for this example is my gross product. Okay, 49,900. Now, if I wanted gross product per cow, I think you'd see that we just divide it by these 100 cows we started the year with, and that would give me $499 a cow is my gross product per cow. Okay, but I'm not just interested in gross product. So let's go one step further. Gross product is the value of my production, but I don't get to keep all that value, do I? I have to pay some expenses with that. So that's where this idea of gross margin comes in. And now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write my gross product up here, 49,900 on those 100 cows, okay, or gross product per cow of $499, okay. But for every one of these cows, don't we have expenses? Okay. And those expenses, some of them, one more cow, one more expense, right? Well, we call those kind of expenses direct costs, okay, direct costs. Okay, and that's an expense that goes up directly as the units of production increase. So let's list some of them. The first one is going to be interest. Okay. Now, remember, I said if we use my money, we'll pay me interest. If we use your money, we're going to pay you interest. If we use the bank's money, we're going to pay them interest. Okay. So even if we own all the cows, this first direct cost is always interest. Okay, whether it's the bank's money or somebody else. So we're just going to pull out some numbers here real quick. Let's say I have $50 per cow in interest. The next direct cost is feed. And let's say I have 150 direct costs in feed. And that would be like total hay, total protein, salt and mineral, all those things added together. And this is cost per cow. The next one is going to be things like vet medicine. So shots, vaccinations, any of those kind of things. Let's say we got $25 in that. And then the next one would be like marketing commissions. So like sale barn commissions when you sell them at the sale barn, and trucking. Okay, so hauling expenses. And let's say we have a total of $25 in marketing and trucking. So total direct costs, okay, so 250 is $250 per cow. Okay. All right, so gross margin. Let's define gross margin. Gross margin is equal to gross product minus direct costs. Okay. Gross product minus direct costs. So the value of my production minus the cost on that go up as each animal goes up. Okay. So we've got a gross product of $499, and I'm just going to call it $500. And then we've got a direct cost of $250. So my gross margin is $250 per cow. Okay. So the reason I want to introduce this to you is as we look back at our chart here, we've got our overhead costs that are the same for a given set of units. And then we've got a direct costs. And now these costs go up as the units of production increases. So if we have one animal, we've got a small amount of direct costs. As we add more animals, those direct costs step up incrementally. Okay. So the addition of these two lines is my total cost. Okay, so if I have my overheads plus my direct costs, then this is my total cost right here. Okay. And then I have one more line here, which is the gross product. And that's the value of production. Okay. If I have one cow, be way down over here. Okay. One cow, I'd be right down here. 2 cows, 3 cows, 4 cows. Eventually, I'm going to get to the point where the value of my production covers my overheads, but I still have my direct costs on top of there. At some point, I'm going to get to right here. Okay. And what is that point? Okay. Above that point is profit, and below that point is loss. So that point becomes our break even for our costs. Okay. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time focused on break even, because if you spend all your time on break even, what do? You tend to break even. Okay. We want to focus on the profit side of that. Okay. But that break even does help understand the model here with the diagnostics. Okay. So now we've got the model built. So I hope you've got those lines drawn if you're drawing along with us. Overheads, direct costs, gross product, and then mark off profit and loss. So now let's start playing with this. Okay. I'm going to click through this because we covered it while we were talking. All right. So there is our model. So there are 3 things that any business can do to increase profit. Okay. Now, as you look at this model, it's true for all businesses, right? All businesses have overhead costs. All businesses have direct costs. Okay. And in any business, there's only 3 things we can do to increase profit. So what would be the first one? If we could control that red line, if we had some leverage on those overhead costs, what would we want to do with those overhead costs? Would we want to bring those overhead costs down? Okay. So number 1 is to reduce overheads. Eddie, do you think there might be strategies to decrease the depreciation and repairs on the machines that a business is using? Okay. Yeah, there probably are. In your ranching business, could you find ways and through certain ways to say, well, we're going to put in a culture of we drive slow here, or we take care of stuff, right? Everything gets maintained as it should. So maybe there's ways to reduce overheads. Okay. Now, as we reduce those overheads, you see that direct cost line comes down with it, and we can operate at a new break-even point. Okay. So we can pull those down to a new break-even. So there's one strategy to reduce overheads. Okay. Another strategy is what we call increasing turnover. And increasing turnover is really just a fancy way of saying running more units. Okay. So if I've got an existing set of overheads, and I've got, each of those units have a direct cost with them. If I operate further to the right-hand side of this graph, won't I be further in the profit zone? Okay. So the previous webinar, we were talking about getting good at grazing. Okay. Well, getting good at grazing is really a way to increase turnover. Okay. It's doing more with the existing set of overheads. So we could be operating further out there. All right. So this last one. This is where we have to come back and look at those that gross margin we talked about, because if all you do is look at the graph here, you'd say, well, I want to cut direct costs. Okay. Well, cutting direct costs, sure, it could bring down the total cost, but don't you think if you cut direct costs out, something like feed, all right, I'm going to take all the feed cost out of the business. Isn't that going to have a relationship on that green line, the gross product? Okay. So couldn't you see how that green line could actually come down by cutting out direct costs? Okay. So just cutting direct costs alone is probably not the right strategy. It's trying to starve a profit into a business. What if all you did was focus on the green line and say, well, I want to be more productive. Okay, I want more gross product. Okay, what if you did that? What's it going to do to other things? So in a cow business, if we want more gross product, we want to wean more calves. We want those calves to be bigger. Okay. If we start doing that, what often comes along with that? It tends to increase our direct costs, right? So if we want more breed up, bigger calves, we're going to feed something different. We're going to add an input somewhere. Could you see where those direct costs could just go off the charts and we'd actually end up at a higher break-even point? So interesting to note that right there has been the historic approach of ranching in the last 3 decades has been chasing productivity without any thought of profitability, right? So we're very good at being productive, but not very good at being profitable. And the last thing we want to focus on, so this idea of gross product and direct costs, okay? The way we look at that is the gross margin per unit. And really what that is that's the relationship of the blue line to the green line, okay? The relationship of those two lines. So are there ways we can reduce direct costs and get a really good gross product? Or are there ways we can increase that gross product with only slight increases in direct costs? Okay. And so maybe there are. So the gross margin per unit measures the economic efficiency of production. And so if we improve that, we'll find ways to operate at a higher profit. Okay. So any business, those are the only 3 things you can do to increase profit. It all comes down to either reducing overheads, increasing turnover, or improving gross margin per unit. So let's take this back and look at our down and out farms where we started. Okay, what's going on in their business? Let's pull their business apart and look at what's actually going on. So inside their business is actually several different enterprises. We've got cow calf, we've got heifer development, and we've got haymaking business. Okay, and down and out farms has a set of overhead costs that's represented by the OH here at the top. Right. So there's just cost of keeping the doors open on the business, these overheads. In the cow calf business, there is a gross product. We just calculated that for an example ranch. There's also direct costs associated with that. So the cow calf business has a gross margin. This is money left over to service those overheads. Same in the heifer development and same in the haymaking business. So if we were to put some numbers together for that, here's what it could look like, okay? The cows had a $105,000 gross margin, and the heifers had a $50,000 gross margin. Now, if we break those down and say, what's the gross margin per standard animal unit, we see that the cows for each standard animal unit made $250, and the heifers for each standard animal unit made $500. So those heifers per unit are twice as profitable. Okay? They're twice as more profitable than those cows are. The haymaking business, their gross margin was $26,000. But down here, we see that we have divisional overheads for the haymaking business. What this means is those are machines and labor units that are just used for making hay that don't appear in those other enterprises. So when we look at the divisional profit or loss of the haymaking business, it actually lost $9,000 by making that hay, where our livestock made $135,000, but our business overheads were $201,000. And so we didn't quite service all those business overheads, right? So let's look at this one more level deeper. Okay, we've already covered the 3 secrets. So if we lay those there and we put the numbers next to them, their overheads are $201,000. Their haymaking business lost $9,000 economically. Their cows made $105,000 and their heifers made $50,000. Okay, so that's what remember how when we started this, I showed you that whole list of numbers and I said, where's the problem? Okay, and the answer was, well, we don't know. It's not clear. Okay, well, as we start laying the numbers down this way, when we've done the numbers now in a way to make management decisions easier, okay, it's a lot easier to see what's going on, right? Okay. So there's some parts of the business that are working well, and there's other parts of the business that are not working so well. So if this is your business you're looking into, what would you say we should do? Okay. Well, there's certainly some strategies here. So economically, this business is losing $25,000. Well, let's come up with those strategies. So first thing I'd say to do is if we're losing money by making hay, let's stop making hay. Okay? Now I'm not suggesting your businesses are losing money making hay. Okay, maybe haymaking is really what's pushing the cart here. Okay, but for these guys, it's not working. So let's stop making hay. Well, when we do that, we're going to free up some feed resources. So what business do you want to scale up? Okay, when we look at the cows and the heifers, per standard animal unit, you might remember those heifers were twice as profitable. Okay? So what if we went to our neighbors and said, hey, I want to buy your heifer calves. Okay? They fit good with mine, and I want to run twice as many heifers as next year. Okay? So maybe we can figure out a way to do that. As we looked at those cows, these guys said, well, there's something in this cow business that isn't working quite well. Maybe we're feeding too much. Maybe we're not feeding enough, something like that. They're going to find a way to increase the gross margin of those cows. So they said, well, we need to do better on those cows. So they found some strategies to turn that into $135,000 gross margin. On those heifers, they're going to double that. They said, man, we're doing good at this. Let's just do twice as many of them. Let's take some of those feed resources that we were making hay with, and we're going to raise more heifers. Okay? And here's what it looks like now. So through diving in and putting some strategies to work on here, using the 3 secrets to increase profit, they took a business that was losing $25,000 and turned it into a business that was making $55,000. Okay, so that's a 1-year turnaround of $75,000, $80,000. Okay, that by looking at the business economically and coming up with those strategies. Okay? And this is not unusual to see a business that would turn around and that tune when they finally get the numbers in front of them in a way to make those adjustments. Okay. So I realize I've covered a lot of ground here and we're starting to wrap up with time, but I think a good quote to end this with is, it's been said, if you never do the hard thing, life will be hard. But if you'll do the hard thing, life can be easier. So dissecting these numbers and pulling your business apart in this way, it's not an easy thing to learn how to do. Okay? It takes some time. It's outside of our comfort zone for many of us. But if you never do the hard thing, like figuring out where your business is working, your life can continue to be hard. But if you'll learn how to do some of these hard things, you can find some solutions to help make your life easier. Okay? That's what it's about. So just to wrap up here, if you like what you've seen here and you want to dive in more, go to our website. And I've covered this in the previous webinar, but I'll just click through it briefly here. We do a twice a month newsletter called Profit Tips. We have a free lesson that you can sign up for on email called First Steps. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We've got all those things. Following us on social media. We've got books and DVDs for sale on our website that you can get kind of a sampling of what we offer. And then, of course, we have the Ranching for Profit School and the Executive Link programs that we've talked about. So, all right. I hope somebody's out there in cyber world. So I'll stop talking. And Catherine, have any questions come through?
I don't see any questions, but we might just give them a little time to formulate their questions if they want to, and we still have 19 minutes before our session is complete. So we can, if there's anything else you can think of you want to talk about, we can look at your dates here for 2021. If you have anything to offer for them.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of new schools there on the calendar, places that we have not been before. So the Cheyenne, Wyoming school is a new addition this year, and so is the Kennewick, Washington school. So if maybe we haven't been in your area yet, there might be an opportunity to come. One thought on that is I often hear people say, well, I'm going to wait to come to the school that's close to me, right? And something to drive home is we cover the same material no matter where we go, where in the U.S. we go, and really a lot of the value that you get from the school is being around the people in the classroom. You can see these pictures here on the lower right. This is actually fellow participants teaching each other about the principles that we're talking about in the school, and so there's an opportunity to do that most mornings. And who would you learn more from? Somebody who ranches in the same environment you do, or somebody who ranches in a different environment with different challenges? And it's generally the latter of that. So just because maybe the dates don't work out of the school that's closest to you, I would encourage you to look at traveling to attend.
Okay, we have a question from our audience. They said it's a great presentation. How much does the Ranching for Profits schools cost? And they are interested in the January 24th through the 30th school.
Sure. Yeah. So our school is $2,750 for the first person from a business, 2,000 for the second person from a business. So, you know, if you're sending two people from a business, you're going to have at least $5,000 invested in travel and lodging and all the things to come to a school. And I know at first, oftentimes people kind of step back from that and feel like, boy, that's a lot of money. When you look at the resources that we're managing and the decisions that you're making, and so and maybe you are currently ranching and running a couple 2, 3, 4, 500 cows, I don't know. You look at the resources that you're managing in that, and for most of us, we're managing multi-million dollars of assets when we're making these decisions. And if you looked at any other business and said, what do you spend on your key decision makers who are making decisions around multi-million dollars of assets, right? That in any other business in agriculture, investing that kind of money in our key decision makers would be a no-brainer, right? We'd be sending our CEOs to continuing education programs every year. But for some reason, agriculture, we have this perception that we don't invest in ourselves, right? And the only thing I do every year is I go to the meeting in town where the feed salesman gives you the spiel and gives you a free steak, right? And really that's kind of lunacy, isn't it? When you think about how we run our businesses and the decision making. Now I realize I'm talking to people who are at a continuing education event, so I'm right, not talking to the average person here. So that's one way of thinking about it. And then another way is people often say the Ranching for Profit school is like a 4-year college degree in 1 week. And so what do you invest in yourself if you were going to do a 4-year college degree, right? So it's the Ranching for Profit school is not your typical continuing ed program that most people are familiar with, right? This is an intense, oftentimes it's a life-changing week where you really get your hands around running your business.
Next question is, how do I register for it?
Yeah, if you can go on our website, you can register online right there. You can call our office at the number on the upper right, and we can take it all from you over the phone. So however works best for you, we're glad to help you.
Do you have any plans to offer virtual workshops in the future?
I don't. And we've been thinking about this as a company to say how, in the new world of COVID, is there a way we could do this virtually? And the people that have been through the school will understand this, but most of the value of the school is about being away. It's about not having the distractions of home pulling at you and taking your concentration away. It's about being in the room with other people to have the conversations that you need to have. And I have not figured out how to do that through a virtual format. So I don't want to offer something that doesn't give good results. What we have done is we have now developed an online support curriculum for people who leave the school. So once you've graduated from the school, we've got a lot of webinars of short videos that support people in applying the principles that they learned at the school. So we have done that virtually, but we don't have any plans to offer a Ranching for Profit school virtually.
In your experience, what is the one thing you see that ranchers could cut down on in their overhead expenses?
Labor. Most of our ranches are over labored. We have oftentimes added people to the business that are not producing value to justify their costs. Let me give you an example of that. We have a benchmark that we teach in Ranching for Profit that is the gross product. Okay, now think back what I just covered. Gross product is the value of production. Gross product per full-time employee, okay, per FTE. Most ranches, when you look at most North American ranchers, their gross product per full-time employee is about $70,000. Okay, so you take the total gross product of the ranch and you divide it by the number of employees, and you have that number. So what that means is every employee is producing about $70,000 worth of value. Okay, well, what did it cost to employ that employee? Okay, when we went through the numbers, it was $60,000 to $80,000. Okay, is what our cost of employment is. So you can see why most ranches are break even, are losing money, right? We're not producing enough value to justify the costs of the people that are on the ranch. Now we have a set of benchmark numbers that we work through, which is the 20% most profitable businesses that we get a look at every year. And so these are ranches that are actually doing this. So 20% of the people in our database are hitting this target. And the gross product per FTE for our most profitable ranches is $400,000. Okay. So I told you the average is 70 and the most profitable is 400,000. Okay. So there are some ranches that are very good at having a few employees that are doing jobs that create a lot of value in the business. Okay. So, what does this look like? It's probably a very simple to run ranch that doesn't have a lot of complication with it. Or these employees are doing tasks that are extremely high value tasks, right? So maybe they're doing direct sales to consumers that are really producing a lot of product per employee, or maybe it's one employee taking care of 600 cows, right? In a really simple to run way. So the answer to the question is labor. Let me give you one other one that often comes up in these conversations, and it's what's the number one thing that distinguishes high profit ranches from everybody else. So the first question was about overheads, right? And so overheads are land and labor. So the labor piece was that. So this question is just a bit more general of what separates the most profitable ranches from everybody else. And so in our database, this same set of benchmark data that we get to look at, the number that's most correlated with profit is the amount of hay fed per cow. Okay. So, and they're inversely correlated, obviously. Okay. So the ranch that feeds the least amount of hay per cow is generally the most profitable. The ranch that feeds the most amount of hay per cow is generally the least profitable. So there are exceptions on both sides of that, right? I mean, you and I could both imagine a place that doesn't feed any hay, that has terrible cow conception numbers, right? And it's just a wreck. Or on the other hand, a place that has a fairly high amount of hay feeding, but sells really high value animals, right? So maybe they're feeding 3 tons of hay per cow, but they're selling $8,000 bulls every year in doing that, right? So there are exceptions on either side of this, but when we look at the data, and if you had to line up all the ranches, it's really hard for a ranch that can feed half a ton of hay. So we've got a lot of ranches in our database that are feeding half a ton of hay per cow year in, year out, in all environments, by the way. A lot of people will say, well, you can't do that here, right? Well, watch out, because somebody's doing it. So there's a ranch that's feeding half a ton of hay per cow, and then right next door is a ranch that's feeding 3 tons of hay per cow. Right? It's going to be really hard for that ranch feeding 3 tons of hay per cow to compete on profitability with that ranch that's doing it with half a ton of hay. And it's not just the cost of the hay, but think of the amount of labor units, the amount of machines, the amount of all the stuff that a ranch needs to feed 3 tons of hay per cow, right? Versus that ranch that's saying, all right, go out there and graze for 11 months out of the year. And when it snows up tight, we've got hay to help you out. Anyway, that one might be a little bit further into the weeds than we wanted to go, but.
Next question. So using your kids as labor isn't free labor?
I love it. It is for me. Yeah, no, it's a great one. So the way I just went through the numbers, when we look at the numbers economically, we always say, what would it cost to replace the work you're doing on the ranch? And that's the number that we use in an economic analysis, right? So what you actually draw out of the business could be very different. Okay. But when we do an economic analysis, we always say, what would it cost to replace you and the other owners as part of the business? So.
Any more questions out there for Dallas? Okay, we're not seeing anything coming in. Thank you, Dallas, for taking the time and spending the time here with us. You're so full of information. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people out there. Again, we'd like to give out a big thanks to all of our sponsors for the IAC conference. This session in particular was sponsored by our Champions of Native Agriculture sponsors, as well as the Barn to Door. And again, thank you for watching. And we have a trade show that's starting today when this session concludes, and the membership meeting is tomorrow. So if you have anything else, oh, and it's tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Dallas, do you have anything else to add?
I just want to thank you guys for inviting me, and I appreciate people joining on. So it was good to have met you, Kat, and everybody else.
Nice to meet you. Thank you, everyone. It was a great presentation, Dallas. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.